could start from the top of the page, umimeno, right, from the klipa.
Yeah.
Umimeno, nichnas bohem, ruach shtus, and from there, the spirit of folly enters, leads them to sin. And what's mimeno? It says because this ava, this innate love of the nefesh halikis, which always has a desire and a wish to unite with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, always on a constant basis. The problem is that it's covered with a garment. He calls it a sack, the sack of klipa. Because it's covered with a sack of klipa, there is room for the spirit of folly to enter. It's when there's problems, many problems in our lifetime, individually, in community, comes from when there is from ambiguity, things are not clear, states of ambiguity rather, where there isn't clarity, there's always room for problems. When things are clear, rules, regulations, things which are morally accepted, then it's harder to go out of line. It's not impossible, but it's harder. People always pick up in the gray areas. Similarly, the Gemara says, "Ein adam chayte elim ki nichnas beruach shtus." A person does not sin only if a spirit of folly comes in. Where is the room for the ruach shtus? Where is the room for the spirit to enter and to cause, to drive a person to sin? Is because his ahava, his love, is covered with this garment of klipa, which in the end of the day, we mentioned last week, the catch-22. He himself created that sack, and that's why he covered over that emes, that ava, that love, which he has to Kodesh Baruch Hu. So it's covered, so therefore the Ruach Shtus could come in and say, sin further. So it's really, there's a mechanism over here. Aveda Gereres, Aveda, person does Aveda, he causes a cover-up over his neshama, over his emes. And that itself, so now it's a gray area or it's dark, and therefore it's another contributing factor. Rachmanan to sin again. And that's Pshat Ein Adam, and that's where he says, that's from there, it comes at Ruach Shtus. And again, it's in the end of the day, it is a Shtus, because you don't see the Shtus so much, the silliness over the foolishness of the matter, because the Ava, because it's cover up, because it's gray, or it's obscure, and so on. And that's where the shtus could enter. But be'emes, it's essentially a shtus, and it could only sneak in only because the Ava Mesuteres is covered up. And he says also that's why it's called Ava Mesuteres. It's a hidden, innate love, means to say it's not on the surface. If it's on the surface, it's clear. If it's on the surface, the person is driving to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There is no room for sin. So that's why it's called Mesuteres. It can be hidden, but essentially it's all good. Essentially it's all good, and essentially it's all godly, because this is, again, as we elaborated in the past, this is the Chochmah of the Nefesh Halikis, of the godly soul, which is Koyach Ma, which is the Koyach of Bittul. That's where the Yid connects with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where the Yid connects with Hashem, which is that level of Chochmah. But and ultimately that's the Golus. That's the Golus, similar to the Golus Hashchina, again, as we spoke in length the past week. So we'll go on over here, Ela Shegolus Hazeh. Right after this part, Chayte, which you continue in the text sheet, it's Ela Shegolus Hazeh. Right? Do you see in the middle, towards the middle? Ela Shegolus Hazeh. But this exile, right, of the faculty of Chochmah, you see that? Right in the center, almost pretty much the center of the page. Right in the center of the page. So there is the Ela Shegolus Hazeh, this exile to the faculty of Chochmah, Ein Ela B'chinas Mispashetes Mimeno, this which extends itself of the Chochmah, B'nefesh Kulo Lachyesa, which vitalizes the soul. In other words, it extends itself in the soul to vitalize the soul. That's where this Golus exists. Aval Sheidish V'ikir Shel B'chinas Chochmah Shebenefesh Halikis is the source and the main part of this Chochmah of the godly soul always remains b'meichin, in the brain, in the intellectual levels. The Einim Mislabeshes, that part does not invest the levush sak de klipa shebelev b'chol lasmali, in that garment, in that sack of klipa, within the heart, on the left side of the heart, in a state of galus mamish, complete exile, because that's always intact. Similarly, we gave the example, we take a diamond. When you put a diamond in mud and it becomes completely dirty, where do you see this galus? Galus means to say, the term, the definition of galus, is a term used when something cannot come to full expression. When a person, Rahman al is in a state of galus, in a state of incarceration, he's there, but he cannot express himself the way he wants to, the way he's comfortable to, the way he naturally expresses himself. That's important. That's a deep galus, because that is the definition of galus. Something cannot come to its full expression. And the same thing you're dealing with a diamond. When a diamond is placed in mud, you don't see the diamond of it, the beauty of it, as being a diamond, because it doesn't shine. But it doesn't take away one bit from the fact that it is a diamond. And once you clean it, in other words, the essential diamond, in the core essence of the diamond, doesn't change when it's sunk into mud or dirtied by mud or by anything else. It's the dagger, which means spashetas, the extension, the shine of it is in galus, which means it's covered up by the mud. The core, the essence of the diamond remains a diamond, and when you'll clean it up, it'll continue shining. So, similarly, when you say, for example, it's a cloudy day, the sun is not shining through. So we look at the sun, like we say in davening, it's there to illuminate and shine to the land and to the inhabitants upon the land. So when it's a cloudy day, it doesn't seem right. Like, where's the sun? We're not benefiting directly or clearly or to the full extent of the shine of the sun, because the clouds are covering it. But ultimately, the clouds are not covering, eclipsing the sun itself. The sun is there in its full glory. The ray of the sun, where it's relevant to us to give us warmth and to give us light, that's what it's covering to us. It's a cloudy day. It's a dark day. It's not the sun itself. The sun remains intact 100%. Similarly, he says the problem when the chokhmah is in the sack, it's not the core neshama, the core chokhmah, which is the kechma, that important force which connects the Yitzhak Kodesh Baruch Hu, as again we elaborated in the past, the ma, that bittul, that no, which is more than the yes, which is like the faith, the idea which, again, this is all, you don't need to repeat it in this context, because we elaborated in great length and depth in the previous classes. The chokhmah, why is that the core of the neshama? Why is that the connecting link of the Yid with the Kodesh Baruch Hu? But this is what we deal with. We're dealing with now, again, in this context, is that the Chachma itself is not Levush Sak de Klipa. It's the Mispashetis, the part which extends itself in the Chachma, the way the Chachma which comes to expression. The Chachma which comes to expression means the Yid is completely aligned with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and it's clear, and it's shiny, and it's... Shiny means to say there's nothing obscure, there's nothing covering over the reality of God and godliness and so on, and that comes to full manifestation and expression in the Yid's conduct and his Avodas Hashem. He learns Torah, does mitzvahs and so on, as opposed to when he allows the Ruach Shtus to come, when that's covered with that Levush Sak de Klipa, which we just mentioned. So it doesn't come to expression, to manifestation, but the Chachma, the core of it, the diamond itself, the sun, that shining Chachma, is always there. That never goes into Golus Mamash. Now the Alter Rebbe adds Golus Mamash. A bit of exile it is, because the fact that it cannot come to a state of expression, it's bothered by it, because the Chokhmah wants to ultimately, that godliness which exists within the Neshama of man wants to dominate over the whole entire reality of man. So it's some Golus, but Mamash means to say that it placed a dent on the Chokhmah, the core of the Neshama itself, no. So some galus it is, because part of the Chachma is that it should come to expression. But Alter Rebbe says not galus mamash, because the core is like the diamond. Diamond has no desire, but the point of the diamond that it should shine. So if it can't shine, the diamondness, so to say, of the diamond is a problem also. But the end, so it's not mamish galus, but some galus it is. But again, mamish galus is not, because if you clean it up, you'll see it'll just shine like a regular diamond. Cannot change. Similarly, the Alter Rebbe says galus, but not galus mamash, because it's completely intact. And where do you see it? It's in a state of sleep and slumber. It doesn't impact and it doesn't accomplish its accomplishments or its impact in them, means to say in the person, in his talents and functions, in his manners of expression. Kolzman, as long as this Rasha is asukim b'daitam avinasam etayvis ha'olam, they're involved in their knowledge and their understanding in the lusts and the temptations and covetz of olam, of world. Interesting. You see over here, daitam avinasam. You see, because the core of the Rasha, his chachma is kedusha. In their like it says there's no counterpart to the yichida of the nefesh. Interesting. It says that Hashem created zel umazeh asalikim. Because Baruch Hu created everything with its counterpart. If there's a godly soul, there's an animal soul, and if there's a guf, there's a neshama, and so on and so forth. I mean, the guf and the neshama is more the energy, but again, even you're dealing with the neshama, the godly soul, and then there's the other driving force of the animal soul and the bodily drives and so on. But then within the soul itself, there's different levels within the soul. There's we mentioned this the other day. It says in Lashon Chamisha Shemis Nikra has 5 names, which are five levels in the neshama: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. Similarly, Nefesh Bahamis also has. We're not going to go into it now. What is the level? What is more action, one is more feeling, one is more intellect, and again, in the way the godly soul expresses itself, but it has its counterpart in the animal soul as well, the way it acts, the way it feels, the way it thinks, and so on. But deep down, it says, the deepest part of the neshama is the yichida of the neshama. We say it in Neshana Rabbi, yichida liyachdoch. It's the part of the yachid of the neshama which is connected to the yachid of Hashem, which that's where the chelik kamimal, that the core of the neshama is really God. Yichida liyachdoch. So it says that there's a counterpart in the Nefesh Bahamis in all levels, all 4 levels. But when it comes to the Yechida, the core level of the Neshama, there is no counterpart. Because it's such a deep part that is the emes of the Yid. So there can't be 2 emes. On the expression of the Nefesh Bahamis, Kodesh Baruch Hu set it up, there's always a counterpart because Zelu Mazeh Salikim. God created everything which is the opposite force, and Hashem wants challenge. He wants us to serve Him with Bchira Chavshis, with freedom of choice. So there always has to be the good, the bad, and so on and so forth. But the core level of the Yid will always remain only God and godliness. So therefore, interesting, the Rabbi used the lashon binasam v'daitam. Their understanding, their knowledge, their understanding. On that level, there is the investment in the being a Rasha, in klipa and in shtus and things which are insignificant or lower than that, things which are again hepech ratzon Hashem. On that level, when the Rasha is involved, lost the page here. When the Rasha is involved in the binasam v'daitam binasam, in the taivus temptations and lusts of Elam Haza, that's when the chachma, the core level, cannot express itself because he's using his means of expression as an investment in taivus and temptations of Elam Haza, not in Elokus. So the Chachma is right now in a state of sleep and slumber. What does it mean, sleep? When a person sleeps, does it mean that he doesn't have the ability to see or to hear or to think or to understand and so on, or all the other functions the person functions when he's up? It's there, it's just in a state. Now it's closed. He'll wake up, it'll come into function within a second. You don't have to turn on. When the person wakes up, he doesn't have to turn certain buttons and rewind or rewind or wind up something or put things in. The moment the person wakes up, he's in function. He's able to think and he's able to focus, and then it takes time to get a certain clarity, the person. But generally, a person wakes up within a split second. He has all his functions. He's able to see where he is and hear and things which he couldn't do a moment before. So what happened? What happened was that it was put to sleep, but not that they expired. In other words, the Chachma, he uses this as an example. The person's sleeping, it's all there. He's alive. But doesn't have the ability to express himself. That is what happens, or that is what is transpiring when the Rasha continues to place his investment in taivus Elam Hazem, in worldly temptations and matters, without a godly purpose, naturally. So what happens to the Chachma, the core level of Neshama? It's in a state of Shina, it's in a state of Kishabali de Nisai. And here the Alter Rebbe is going to prove that the essence of the Chachma is always intact. It's not Galus Mamash. And similarly, like the Alter Rebbe uses the lashon, when a person sleeps, in a moment in notice, or in a moment he can get up. And when he gets up, he's in full function. Similarly, this in the Rasha, that put his chachma, in other words, that the core of his neshama, that koach ma'ad neshama, he put it to sleep. In what way did he put it to sleep? Not that he did something active to put his sleep. He's involved. He's actively involved with binasi v'daiti in taivas elam hazeh. That itself puts the core of the neshama to sleep. However, that same individual, or Risha'im individuals, when they come to a test and a challenge in a matter of faith which is transcendent of knowledge, hence it touches and it reaches to the nefesh, to the core of the soul, which is to the koach mav the neshama, it immediately wakes up from its sleep, and then it starts to shine, not only on the core level it exists, that always exists. In this case, when it comes to a test, a nisayin, in questions of faith, it starts functioning, it starts expressing itself, and it comes to full levels of manifestation, the koach Hashem HaMalubash, with the godly energy which is invested in this koach ma. And when does that happen? Usually when someone is put to test. The same Rosh, as we spoke many times, the same Rosh, when he stands and he's asked and he's put to the challenge to Chas v'Shalom renounce the oneness of Hashem. And we found it again in our history, in our bitter history, millions of Yidden were put to the test of Emunah in the context of renouncing or announcing the oneness of Hashem. The same individual, which was a Rosh the day before he lived his life as a Kosher B'Kalma, or a Pesha Yisrael, a sinner among Yidden, among his community, among his family. Wasn't far from being an observant Jew. The same individual allowed himself to be killed in front of hundreds of people and completely expired for the name of Hashem, Al Kiddush Hashem. And that you can't say that the Chokhmah is just there and it's sleeping. It comes to full-fledged expression and manifestation. It goes all the way to the end, till the person's not like he's giving up this, he's giving up that, like we do put on tefillin. We give up a little of our sleep to put on tefillin, to daven the minyan, learn Torah, and so on. We give up of ourselves. That's also a state, it's an important state of expression of the neshama. But the real full-fledged expression of the neshama is the Yid is complete to give everything up for Hashem. He's ready to expire completely, literally himself, allow himself to be killed, Al Kiddush Hashem. That's not just a bit of a flow of his Chachma Shebenevesh, that's the Chachma Shebenevesh in full expression and full state of manifestation. It's all the way through the entire system. Nothing could stop me. Take me away. I will not say, Chas v'Shalom, renounce the oneness of Hashem. Even the same person, a moment before, his neshama was sleeping. And where did you see it? Because he was involved in other things. Like it says, Vayikatz ki yoshen Hashem. There's a pasuk, it says when Hashem woke up, it says Hashem Vayikatz. He woke up from a sleep. Again, dealing with Hashem. And in this case, it not only refers to Hashem waking up, in the context of saving his people and so on, but it refers to the Hashem which exists in every single Yid. Vayikatz ki yoshen Hashem, which is again, this is the Hashem which exists in the neshama. Lamid bin Isayin, to stand, to withstand the test, b'emunas Hashem, and the faith of Hashem, b'li shum tam v'das, v'seichel musiglai, without any basis of, in other words, without any knowledge, without any reasoning, without any intellectual calculation, without any intellectual perception why he's doing it. It is just stands without, transcendent of all that. Lizgaber ala klipis, to strengthen himself over the spirits of impurity. V'tayves elam hazeh, and the temptations, or the worldly temptations. Do you have it there? You have it? The worldly temptations, beheter, things which he was involved, which according to Torah they're permissible. And he strengthens himself over that. He's not interested in anything. And more so, he's able to strengthen himself over the spirits of impurity and temptations of Elam Hazeh, of Isur, of prohibitions as well. In other words, the things which Torah prohibits rather. Shohurgal Bohem, which the same individual was accustomed to, which he accustomed himself to, till that point which he had this test to stand and Chas v'Shalom not renounce the oneness of Hashem, Al Kiddush Hashem, that is. And not only that, he's able to overcome those klippos, but he abhors them, He's disgusted with the klippus, and he wants only one thing: Hashem, and to choose HaKadosh Baruch Hu for his share, for his part, for his lot, and so on. To give up his nefesh, his soul, for the sanctity of Hashem's name. And even though you're dealing with an individual that impure spirits have been strengthened himself, they were triumphing over him all his days, because he was involved in Taivas Elam Hazeh, permissible Taivas, permissible Taivas which he was involved and indulgent in them, and Taivas which were crossed the red line, Taivas which were associated with Easter, with prohibitions. In other words, things which Torah says are prohibited, as we learned, they're intrinsically prohibited, they're intrinsically associated with klippus and sitra achra, which spirits of impurity. And these spirits of impurity, the more he got involved with them, the more they were dominant over him. Gavru alav, they strengthened over him to the extent that he was so involved in them that he could not even overcome them in good times. As like the Razal tell us, that the Rishoyim are in the possession, or in the domain of their heart. Usually, a healthy person, his mind dominates over his heart. By a Rasha, it says that he doesn't have the capacity to be dominant over himself, his heart, which is involved in taivas, and again, the temptations, which and taivas elam hazeh, the temptations of elam hazeh, namely those who are usr, even this which is a mutter also. As the famous Ramban says, a person should not indulge himself in taivas heter, because in the end of the day, if there is no godly purpose to them, overly indulging in the permissible also increases in the spirit of impurity, increases again the spirit of impurity to have dominance over the person's pure and innocent neshama. How much more so when the Torah says it's usher, it's prohibited, and a person chas v'shalom crosses that line because he did not overcome his taivas elam hazeh, he increases, he covers the purity and again the innocence of the neshama, which many more layers of impurity. And that's why it says it's hard to creep out of it. It says the famous expression, the Gemara says, a Rosh is full of regrets. Why should he be full of regrets? If you're regretting, it's one regret, because if you're regretting again, means you sinned again. Like we mentioned the other day, the mashal of the kid comes to his parents on Yom Kippur, and he says, I did much more than you, because you only fasted once, and I fasted 5 times, between breakfast and lunch and supper. I fasted so many times, but it's a joke because he didn't fast. Fasting means you just don't eat. The moment you eat, you break your fast. So even you fast from that meal to the next meal, but it's not fasting. Similarly, the Gemara says Rishoyim are full of charatas. They're full of regrets. When you say they're full of regret, because they're constantly sinning. They regret and they sin again. They regret and they sin again. And why so? It's not saying, the Gemara is not saying that their regret is not a true regret. He truly regrets. So why is he tumbling back into sin again? The problem is when you're on shallow waters, you go in, you easily go out. But when you're in deep waters, especially wavy waters, and abundant and overwhelming levels of water and waves which are coming over you, it's hard to get out of it. You can stick your head out, but you're falling back in. Rachmana litzlan, it says, the Rasha. That's why, if you remember in the Perek Yud Zayin, the Alter Rebbe says the special avodah of a Rasha, that he cannot get onto the regular conveyor belt till he does serious tshuva to get rid of all those layers of impurity which he himself covered up over his neshama. You got to get back onto shore in order to start anew. And that comes through the broken, say, Seder of Tshuva, which is namely the name Nishbar, the broken heart. The person puts in perspective what he has done to his neshama, tainted it and dirtied and blemished and stained his neshama, and all that which is neshama's part of God. Again, everything we learned in Perek Yud Zayin, Alter Rebbe says something interesting l'shoinus in the end of Perek Chav Dalet as well. I believe it's Chav Dalet. So it's a special state of tshuva just to come out of it. The average Rasha It's not easy for him to come out of it because he's so involved. In other words, he sunk in, or he allowed the spirits of Klipa and Sitra Achra, the pure spirits, to take him over, to overwhelm him. So they're dominant over him, and that's what the Gemara says. Rosh is b'rishus libam. It's like a kelev. It says kulei lev. The reason why it's called kelev is all heart. There's no structure. The Rasha also. It says b'rishus libam means that your heart is dominant over you. You can't make any structured, healthy decisions, healthy structured decisions, because the heart, the taivas and lamhaza, are completely overwhelming. So the Alter Rebbe gets, and this is the type of Rasha we're dealing with. The same Rasha, which till that time, when he came to that moment of test, of Kiddush Hashem, again, not to Chas v'Shalom renounce the oneness of Hashem, he was so involved in sin that the spirits of impurity were dominant over him. His heart was dominant over him. He couldn't make a clear, structured, healthy, holy or a decision. Or he couldn't maintain a structured, healthy, sanctified mind to make healthy, structured, sanctified decisions. Because he's b'rishus libam. He's fell prey to his heart, which means the taivas elam haza, meaning the negative and impure spirits which hover over, which cover him, which drowned him. He is able to lift himself up a little, but unfortunately, gavru alav, they strengthen, they have dominance over him. The same individual that Klip and Sitra Achra have dominance over him to the extent that he could not lift his head up. The same individual, when it comes to a test, to withstand a test in issues dealing with the faith in the oneness of Hashem, the foundation of Emunah is in the high holy mountains, which in this case, in the context of the Yid, is in the deep core of his nefesh, that high holy mountain within the Yid, which is the Chochmah, the nefesh alikis, that koyach ma, the koyach of faith, the koyach ma of the godly soul, Sheba, within it, Melubash Eidin Baruch Hu, is invested the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In that moment that I call Haklipis Telim Vutolim, all the spirits of impurity are completely annulled, which is an expression, a double expression of batul, something which is annulled, say Lashon batul imavutul, we say it sometimes, and we say it also expressions when it comes to chametz, batul levi, batul keha'afre da'ara, means to say it's a batul imavutul, which is a double expression of complete obliteration and eradication rather, and an annulment of the klipa sitra achra. V'hayu kulei hayu mamash, they come to a state of complete nothingness lifnei Hashem, in front of the godly energy and force which is so transparent and is so manifest in those moments when he gives up his life for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and ready to give up his life for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nothing stands in the way. He goes, yes, take me. Where were you yesterday? Hashem didn't ask you anybody. He didn't ask you to expire. He didn't ask you to take him, or he didn't ask you to take yourself to him. He just asked you to give a little bit of attention to him. Sleep 5 minutes less. Put on tefillin. Go to a shir. And that not necessarily he was ready to do, because the koyach, the chokhmah, it was a camouflage message. He didn't see the God in that decision of doing a mitzvah. Like we said time and again, and Alter Rebbe is going to clarify it in the subsequent parakim. This is the message. Ultimately, every mitzvah is Anechi Hashem Alekecha, associated with Kiddush Hashem, and every aveda is La'il Chalikim Macheinim Al Panei. And that's why we have to take the message really and understand that this is ultimately again what Alter Rebbe is getting to, that this is the way we have to conduct our life, understanding that every mitzvah is Anechi Hashem Alekecha, and aveda is Chas v'Shalom, formally committing idolatry. And therefore we have to be determined by every aveda and determined by every mitzvah, and to perform in the same way as we're standing in front of a mistake, in front of hundreds of people, Chas v'Shalom, not renouncing and announcing the oneness of Hashem. But that's where the message can be camouflaged. But when it comes to the situation that he cannot translate it in any different way, because there's a clear message and they're telling him, do you renounce the oneness of Hashem, or you're announcing the oneness of Hashem? So the same individual says, I'm announcing, and they say, we're going to kill you, and he says, take everything and take me away as well. And the same individual which the day before Hashem didn't say, you don't have to give everything away, we want you to live and have a good breakfast, but before breakfast, go daven. And he slept in, he didn't daven, and so he didn't put on tefillin. Because he was a Rasha, and the klipas govru alav, he was dominant by the klipas which he himself created through his multiple sins and multiple times of sinning the same sins or multiple sins. So he created a whole he created waves of impure forces over his pure and innocent neshama. So he didn't allow himself to give up those 5 minutes for Hashem, for tefillin or mezuzah or a shir and Torah or anything else. And the same thing in the no, Hashem asked, control yourself here and control yourself here and control yourself here, and he didn't, because klipas gavral, the same individual, when Hashem is asking him not give up a little bit, but give up everything, he's ready to give up everything. And what happened to those klipas? How come they didn't come in the way? Because right now the chokhmah, the core of the neshama, came out and woke up of his state of sleep, like the difference of a person sleeping before he sleeps and after he sleeps. It's a world of a difference. Not just like a little better, he could see a little bit and he could think a little bit, or he could hear a little bit. When he's sleeping, nothing is functioning. You could play, if he's something that's a strong sleep, you can have a whole conversation, doesn't know what you're talking about. The moment he wakes up, it's a different person. And the same thing over here. That Hashem, that energy, godly energy which exists within the neshama, gets up, awakens in a moment, that everything which was dominant over him, like you can be dominant over someone who's sleeping, you could color on him, everything, because he's like not in charge. It says by tzaddikim, they're in charge of themselves 100% when they sleep also. But here we're not talking about the kedusha, not kedusha. You could color on the person, you could laugh on the person, you could talk in front of the person. He doesn't feel. The moment he wakes up, it's a different person. And al derech zeh, before that, Hashem didn't ask him to give everything up. Hashem asked him to give a little, but no, he couldn't. His chokhmah was sleeping because he was involved in so many other things, and it covered him. These layers of klip and sitra were covered over the purity of the neshama, so the neshama did not formally express itself, allow itself to come into a state of, again, expression and manifestation. But when it comes to the test of Hashem Echad, all of a sudden he wakes up, and he's ready to throw everything away, as if they're non-existent. Like it says, like it says in front of Hashem, all the nations are insignificant. You could have nations which on the surface they seem to be powerful and overwhelming and with statements and threats and so on. It says in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything's ke'ayin. Hashem is not intimidated by the mightiest nations. So in this case, the Alter Rebbe is using this in a microcosmic scenario of the Yid, because he has a chelik, a part of God within him. So when that comes to a state of expression, a manifestation, kol hagoyim ke'ayin, all the energies, all the nations are completely insignificant. In this case, what are the nations? The nations are the forces of klip and sitra, which all the time till that state of that test al kiddush, when he stands al kiddush Hashem, were intimidating, and they were overwhelming. But when it comes kinegdai, which means to that core of God which exists in the Yid, kol hagoyim kain, there's no more intimidations. All the nations, in this case, nations means all that energy which existed before our God. Uksiv another pasuk, kini avecha Hashem, kini avechi Hashem, kini avechi yevedu. That your enemies, Hashem, and again the pasuk says your enemies will be lost, yispardu, they'll be completely disseminated. And again, on the bigger picture, it refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But in this scenario, it refers to the Hashem which exists within the neshama. All those enemies are God. I think the end of the pasuk, the gamer, which means just like you take something which congeal, you place it in front of fire, it melts immediately. So too it says that when you take all these energies which block the neshama to express itself, but when it comes in front of the fiery expression of the neshama, they get completely lost. Like it says, even harim kadei, even mountains, as something which was congealed and melt, these mountains will melt in front of this hot energy. In this case, and the Alter Rebbe used the lashon harim. He brings the pasuk on because the klipas were mountains. They didn't allow the neshama to express itself. But when it comes that state, when the person stands al kiddush Hashem, even harim no kadeinu namasu, even mountains, again, which is an expression of forces which are intimidating. Like you come in front of a mountain, it can be intimidating. Even these harim are in front of Hashem, kadeinu gnamas, and again dealing with the elokus, with the godliness which exists within the neshama of the Yid. That even hurting things which were intimidating till now, which is again the klipos and sitrach, which is gavru Allah in this case, because of that Hashem which comes, that godly force which is associated with his kechma, comes to full state of expression and manifestation, even hurting completely melt away. And therefore he's able to go all the way till the end. He says, I'm ready to be expired, Al Kiddush Hashem. Now, we'll stop over here. Hopefully next week we'll finish this important, beautiful Pedic. Every Pedic in Tanya is beautiful, but the way the Alter Rebbe brings this out so clear, such a beautiful habir, it's so rich. The Rebbe is going to tell us in the end of the Pedic that to what extent will the person go to give up his life to Kiddush Hashem. The Alter Rebbe points out over here that the Chachma, the Koach of the Nefesh, we'll see next week, it goes to such a extent, it stands in such potent expression that it's not ready to compromise at no level, no form or fashion. Like we find the story with Hannah and her 7 sons, or like again in our history, this was the case. It didn't mean that someone had to withstand the test of formally converting and living the next 40 years of his life in complete belief in other religions or things which are Avodah Zarah. They told him, take this stone, bow down to it. Apparently, like, who cares? Bow down to it, and you know what your heart believes. You know what or say you believe in this God. So what you say? You say something external and just go on with life. In your heart, you know what you believe. You believe in Hashem, and you're going to go ahead and do everything Hashem wants subsequently. But we notice, and again, this is in the context of the Aveda, Yidden gave themselves up, gave their life up, not only to completely change their beliefs or formally change their beliefs. Even they went to such an extent that even to express themselves momentarily, and even in the most external manner, they're still ready to give up their lives. Bow down to the stone? No. We're going to kill you. Kill him. Seems such a trivial expression. Just to bow down. Or say you believe in this. Speech by definition is something so external in comparison to the stormy belief or stormy expressions of the heart and mind. The Yid went till the end. He wouldn't speak against Achdus Hashem. He wouldn't even to express himself in the most external expression as prostrating in front of a stone or whatever they guessed, and ready to give up his life. Again, based on the halacha parameters of Avodah Zarah. So that shows again how the Chachma doesn't just get up. It's just another dimension of the enormous expression of the neshama once it does get up, that it goes to the most distant extents of expression, manifestation, that nothing stands in its way, that even something so external will also not stand in the way of the neshama, chas v'shalom, not to deny Hashem echad. That's what again we will learn and finish Bez Hashem the Perek Latin the next week, and here and Bez Hashem, and then Perek Chav, the Alter Rebbe begins. This again, what the Rebbe is leading to, which we just mentioned it in brief, but in the past again we mentioned this a few times. At the end of the day, once we place in our minds the right perspective, the true perspective, the way Torah looks at a mitzvah, and the way Torah looks at Aveda, that it's not something that we can ever err and mistake and say, well, Aneicha Hashem Elokecha is one thing, but putting on tefillin, is that really announcing the oneness of Hashem? No. Or same thing. To denounce the oneness of Hashem is one thing, but chas v'shalom, to do it a small aveda, that's not mamish denouncing the oneness of Hashem. Dr. Rebbe is going to bring the famous medrash that every mitzvah is aneicha Hashem l'kecha, every aveda is leil l'chalikim l'chem alpanei. Hence, that's the way, that's the approach we have to every mitzvah. That's the approach we have to every chas v'shalom aveda. The same thing, in essence, the way the Yid, every Yid, on any level, is approached to chas v'shalom, to Achdus Hashem, not to renounce the oneness of Hashem. And the average Yid, and every level it may be, is approach to announcing the oneness of Hashem. That's Bez Hashem going to be, and again, the punchline in Perek Chaf through Chaf Hey Bez Hashem. Okay, have a great night.